except for I am in my head, and I'm going to tell people that there are things that they don't know. So that's rude. I apologize. All right. So I am Ruth Fraser Davis, and up until about a few days ago, I was the Standing Conference Committee Chair, and I am chair for this conference, which is crazy because this is not my greatest skill set at all. But I am super proud to be moderating this pre-conference presentation for the 2025 Evergreen International Conference. I do want to give a shout out to our champion level sponsors, Midwest Tape and Hoopla, the app that goes along with it. Well, they have lots of products, but that's the one we're talking about today. Stat Courier, Equinox Open Library Initiative, Unique Management, and my favorite, because they pay me money and I really love their mission and I represent them as well, is the Evergreen Collaborative Development Initiative. But all of our champion level sponsors make this possible. I also want to thank our presenters. Today we have Richard Garafolo from Cleveland Community College, Libby Stone from Cleveland Community College, Staci Wilson from, oh, I'm going to say it out loud, but I may regret it, Catawba.
You got it.
Oh,
You did it.
I'm from Michigan, so we do have experience saying things that are not necessarily in like a traditionally English language, but Catawba Valley Community College, and then Charles Wiggins from Isothermal Community College, who are representing, and I know I'm going to get this wrong. I can't remember all the things that go along with the North Carolina Community College Evergreen, and then group. We're calling it a group right now.
Right.
And so they're going to be talking about their experience migrating, coming to Evergreen from proprietary systems into the open source world. I'm very excited because I love Evergreen, and I love the open source ethos. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to shut up and let them move forward. I would encourage you, if you have questions, to put them into chat, and as it becomes like a natural stopping point or something like that, I will gather up the questions and interrupt, because that is within my skill set, and ask those questions. So thank you all for being here. Now's the time. I'm going to hand it off to Libby, who's going to hand it off to whoever the heck she wants to. And I'm going to stop sharing so you can see things bigger.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I'm going to hand it off to Rich. He's going to start us off.
Again, I want to welcome everybody. As Ruth said, my name is Rich Garafolo, Director of Library Services at Cleveland Community College here in North Carolina. One of 58 community colleges that are in the state, and I'm just going to take this opportunity, to just let you know that we picked the title "Future of Community College Library Management: An Evergreen Success Story" because we truly feel that this was a success story, and as you'll see through our presentation, when we first started this, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. We were for the most part flying by the seat of our pants, and just sort of just went where the evidence and where our research and took us, and thankfully we were guided. As you'll see through this presentation, we were guided by our state library and NC Cardinal, as we went through this process. But I just wanted to start out by welcoming everybody to the presentation, and I hope you all get something out of this. That if and when you ever have the time or the occasion to contemplate starting your own consortium, and we'll get into why we're not called a consortium as well. But if you ever get into that situation, hopefully we've got some tips that'll be useful for that. So without further ado, we're going to start our presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Charles because he's going to talk about the history of how we got to where we are today.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn off my video so I'm not distracted by myself. So it occurred to me yesterday that we're going to be speaking to a bunch of people that have no idea how the North Carolina Community College system operates. So I thought I would start off with a little background. And because it's so complicated, I just decided to write this part out. So the North Carolina Community College system is a multi-layer system with a state governing body, the State Board of Community Colleges, a central system office for administration and support, the respective county governments, which are responsible for supporting facilities and operations, and the local community colleges themselves. The system office, which is a state agency, is responsible for implementing policies, providing support, and advocating for the advancement of community colleges. North Carolina has 58 community colleges serving 100 counties. Each community college has a discrete service area, usually one to four counties, although College of the Albemarle serves 7 counties because of their unique geography where they're located. Each community college has its own local board of trustees, typically with 13 members who are appointed by the governor, county commissions, and local boards of education. So each community college is an independent entity, but responsible to both state and local governing bodies. For example, a community college's real estate is typically owned by the college, not the state. And we who work in the community colleges are not state employees, but employees of our respective colleges. Because of this structure, each community college has enjoyed a fair amount of autonomy in daily operation and self governance in matters not explicitly defined elsewhere. So it's against this backdrop we're going to begin our story. And our story actually starts approximately 30 years ago in the mid 1990s. Um, the community college system had adopted a computer system called Prime. It was a Unix system, and so a lot of the libraries were looking for a library system that would run on that platform, and the Dynix system fit that bill. And it was an old fashioned command line structure, but at that time it was pretty state of the art. In fact, it had an integrated email system at a time when most people did not have email at all. So we could email back and forth. And, so if you were working a different shift with somebody and you needed to coordinate something, you could send them an email. They could check it when they got in, they could email back. And at the time, we consider that very innovative. It was a very straightforward system. Everything came with a manual. It was well thought out. There was a particular way to do anything. It was all well documented. So if you needed to learn how to place a hold, you could go to the documentation and look that up and see step by step how you place a hold. If you needed to remove a hold or change something about a hold, or if you needed to add a new patron, all of those things were well documented and again, very well thought out. Around 1996, 1997, I was working at AB Tech, one of our community colleges here, as the evening clerk, and got the distinct privileges of being the person to beta test when Dynix released their reserve module. And again, I was given a manual, could go through it. And I really did not have much feedback for Dynix at that point because it was so well thought out. Every little problem had been anticipated and tested, and so I really didn't have a whole lot of feedback for them. So, still at the same time, each college had its own installation. We were all operating independently, basically what we called standalone. We did get into a mode where we could, I think it was through Telnet, we could log into each other's systems and check what we held. And then if a college was willing, we could do a rudimentary interlibrary loan. So we could start exchanging resources among ourselves, but we're still each on our own platform. And in 1995 or so, the Dynex users group and Dynex kind of got together and started talking about a system where all of the libraries could be on one platform together and share that system. And so that was eventually developed into the Dynex Automation Center. And because it was a central system, it was decided that the system office in Raleigh would host the server. And so we started migrating onto this system. And initially, we called ourselves the DAC, Dynex Automation Center. But after a while, Dynex kind of said, well, you need to kind of name it something else. Dynex Automation Center, that belongs to us. So we eventually came up with the name Community College Libraries in North Carolina, or CC Link. So CC Link was plowing along. By 1997, there were 36 of the 58 community colleges that were part of CC Link. And then North Carolina State Purchasing and Contract came along, and we were basically leasing the system from Dynex. And Purchasing and Contract said, well, we need to look out in the marketplace and see if there are other competitors. Can we do this in a more cost-effective way? And our consortium basically became the test case for Purchasing and Contract managing these things. And so, I mean, there's a lot of detail to all of this, but basically they put a team together and put out a request for proposals. And so 1998, 1999, it went through the RFP process. And because of the way that works here in North Carolina, it was very secretive. We had input in terms of what we were looking for, but only the team could actually participate in the process, and they couldn't tell us anything about the process. And that holds true to this day, as we'll discuss later in the presentation. But suddenly, 1999, early 2000, we're told that we're going to be migrating to a new system that is designed by a company called Staci. And so 1998, I had gone off to grad school. The end of 1999, I graduated with my library science degree, and I got hired at Blue Ridge Community College, which is another one of the colleges in our current group, and was also a part of CC Link at that time. And so I had been on the job for 6 months, and we had to migrate from Dynex into CC Link. And so we're running reports like crazy and all the things you would do in preparation for that. We got a little bit of training. There was an implementation team that made a lot of decisions about how things were put together. But in a nutshell, on July 1, 2000, when we switched over from the Dynex system to the Staci system, which was at that time Unicorn Academe, we felt lost. There was no manual on how to do things. We had been used to doing things the Dynex way for so long, and everything was different. We got some training, but we would go to the training and we would ask them specific questions. How do you do this? How do you do this? And a lot of times the answer was, well, it all depends on your implementation. And what we came to realize was that Unicorn Academe was a shell, and it could be implemented in a very powerful way, but we had not done that. And because so many of the decisions were being made by committee, it really undercut a lot of the power of the system. And I'm kind of meandering here, but basically, we were frustrated from the get go with this new system that we felt like we had been forced into. And for a lot of us, that frustration never fully went away. We learned more about using the system as we went along, and we helped each other. We developed local trainers. I was the first reserves and reports trainer for CC Link on this new system. And after a while, Libby took over as the reports trainer. So, we helped each other along, but we still ran into lots of frustrations. Even way down the road, we would find out that the system was capable of certain things, but we couldn't do those things either because those powers were reserved for the system administrator, or because of the way our system had been implemented. Basically, there was no background data to make certain things possible. So, kind of flash forward a bit, I was at Blue Ridge until 2008, and then I got my position here at Isothermal Community College. So I left CC Link because at that time, Isothermal was in a consortium with the local public libraries. And we were using a completely different system. We were developing our own interlibrary loan here within our 2-county service area, Rutherford and Polk County, and it was really robust. Along the same lines, at the same time, NC Cardinal was getting off the ground, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with NC Cardinal. There are public library consortium here in the state, and the public libraries in the consortium that Isothermal was in, they found it very attractive to move to NC Cardinal. So Polk County Library was the first to leave our consortium and go to NC Cardinal. And I could see the handwriting on the wall. So to make it a little bit quicker, in 2019, because a community college library was not, NC Cardinal was not ready to deal with an academic library. Basically what it came down to, and I understood that. So I had to make a decision: was Isothermal going to go standalone, or were we going to join CC Link, which was really the only game in town? So we did. In 2019, we migrated from our previous system back into CC Link. And, mind you, it had been 11 years since I had worked in CC Link, and they were on a different platform. Can't remember the name of it at the moment, but that's not really important. There had been supposedly some upgrades, but when after we migrated and I logged in for the first time and I was looking around, after 11 years, I could not see a spit of difference between the system as it had been in 2008 and the system as it was in 2019. And I don't know if there were better products available and they just weren't made available to CC Link. I'm not ascribing blame to anybody here, but it was a cold, chilling slap in the face, because basically when we migrated, I recognized Unicorn Academe as basically a GUI interface on top of a command line system, similar to when Windows first started off. It was basically a GUI interface on top of DOS. And so I recognize that. And the frustrating thing about the Cersei system was every single function was a separate protocol. They called them wizards. And so if you wanted to check a book out, that was one wizard. If you wanted to place a hold, that was another wizard. If you wanted to pay a fine, that was another wizard. If you needed to assess a fine on a patron for something like printouts or something like that, that was another wizard. So you were constantly switching back and forth instead of having a singular interface for the patron, where you could go in and you could place a hold on that for that patron. You could take a fine for that patron, and you were just making minor changes. So we weren't really getting anywhere as far as improvements to the system. There were some improvements to the OPAC, but they were primarily superficial. The underlying structure really had not changed much from the time we first migrated in 2000. So, pretty much 20 years we were on more or less the same system with very little in way of improvement.
I guess it's my turn.
I guess so.
I can get back to my screen here. So,
Libby, I think Staci was supposed to take it up from there, wasn't she?
no. We're on the right track.
Okay.
No, I'm not up to the timeline.
All right.
Yeah, I'm getting to the timeline.
Gotcha.
So, after all this history, a small group of us, 5 of us at the beginning, had this vision to have, of course, the ideal would be to have all 58 community college libraries operating together, which that ideal may or may not ever happen. But the thing was, so many of us were just unsatisfied, to say the least. So we started having these conversations and trying to figure out what were we going to do, what could we do. In July 2016, the system office came out and said that they wanted to solicit bids for a new integrated library system. So in November of 2016, the RFP team began to meet. I was a part of that first team. Staci was also on that team. There were 5 community colleges represented. No, Staci, help me out. There was, I think there were 5 or 6 of us, or 7.
I think 5 is right.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, 5. I think 5 is right.
You and I were the only 2 out of our 4 who were on that first team.
David was on that first team.
Yeah, David was at Surrey Community College.
Yeah.
RFP was issued. We did a lot of research. We did a lot of exploration, had many meetings over several months. Unfortunately, I believe that first RFP expired, which was not anything that we had done or not done, but we had to do another one. So Staci and I again agreed to serve on the second team, and I believe that's when Charles came on board, and Rich, and we made a recommendation in 2018 for a contract award, but the system office, North Carolina Community College System, determined that the vendor we had selected was lacking the required security and was not in the best interest of the state. So we were going to be staying with Cersei, which had become Cersei Dynex by this point. We sent out a survey. I was chair of our CC Link, Community College Libraries in North Carolina. I was chair of our steering committee at that time. And we surveyed all the directors and came up with a list of questions and met with the system office. A lot of us, we just were not happy. We couldn't believe that we'd gone through all this work and time and effort to, at the end of the day, come away with just live with what you got. So in October of 2019, we started talking with the state library, Benjamin Murphy, with NC Cardinal, and kind of exploring the options that we could have. Like, was there a grant we could apply for? We liked their model. We wanted to learn more about it. So Benjamin was super helpful to us in starting our process.
And so to pick up where Libby got us to at that point, in January of 2020, our system office signed a 3-year contract on behalf of the system with Cersei Dynix with options for 2 additional 1-year contracts. And that decision was kind of made in isolation. Like, it was not one where many of the library administrators or staff were at the table. So that, like Libby had said, we had a lot of conversations happening around this time, and that led to a group of 5 librarians representing Stanley Community College, Gaston Community College, Surrey Community College, Lenore Community College, and Catawba Valley Community College to start having to start some collaboration sessions to see if we could use an LSTA grant to fund our own project. And so we started writing a planning grant first. So we wrote the planning grant in the spring of 2020. And in July of 2021, we were awarded the planning grant, and we hired a consultant to help us just evaluate what are our best options, what's out there. And we came to some decisions. And in November of 2022, we decided we were ready for the next step, which was to write a letter of intent for a project grant. And so we submitted that in November of 2022. Again, these same 5 libraries, we were the ones who started that first grant. And now I'm going to pass it back to Charles. Charles, you're muted.
Yeah, Charles, you're muted.
Sorry about that, folks. So in July of 2023, we actually began the project grant with the goal of migrating that following December. So I don't know if any of you have ever been through a migration, but it's a lot of work, and this was going to be my second one in 5 years. So I had done a lot of the cleanup work previously, so I tried to help people in terms of what they might want to do to prepare. You know, getting rid of old patron records, patrons that, pretty sure are not coming back, deleting old fines related to them, getting old lost books out, going through and making sure that the records reflect your collection as much as possible. And, in a basically a 5-month window, it's basically difficult to do all that. So everybody kind of had to prioritize. There was a lot of coaching with people. The majority of our folks were coming from the CC Link system. We did have one library that was migrating from a standalone system, but basically just helping everybody clean everything up and prepare. There was a lot of back and forth with Mobius, so we on the planning committee could understand the implementation and how things work. Just helping people understand data mapping and, understanding the difference, how item types in the Cersei system related to circ modifiers in Evergreen parlance, just helping people understand all of those things and understand the timeline. And of course, we, being academic libraries, we have things to worry about, like reporting on our federal reporting on IPEDs. And so we have to report our number of items and circulations and things like that. And so for that particular year, we're going to be harvesting some of that information from the old Cersei system, and some of that information would be coming from the Evergreen system for the following reporting year. Just getting all those ducks in a row. So the initial 25 community colleges we migrated successfully in December, and fortunately the timing was good. we had Christmas break for those of us who were leading to try and get a little bit more familiar with the system. So when we came back in January, we could more or less hit the ground running, helping people get used to the new system, showing them where documentation was when they had questions, and Debbie and Blake were just phenomenal and very patient with us, helping us through that process. And so we got a second year grant, and we've described the process as herding cats several times. The second year grant was definitely a herding cats kind of process, getting our libraries to commit. And so we ended up with 25 additional libraries. So in December of 2024, they migrated. So we ended up with 50 of the 58. And I forgot to mention this before, but we eventually, on the CC Link system, Isothermal was the 52nd library in. So where we ended up, all but 5 of the CC Link libraries migrated. So there are 5 libraries still using the Cersei Dynex CC Link system that is paid for by the system office. But now we're cruising along with our 50 libraries and helping one another. And I don't know, anything anybody else want to add before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I just would like to point out how amazing it is that we had 50 library administrators all agree on one thing.
Yep.
Just the volume.
And can I just get a point of clarification? So does that mean that now currently you have 53 of 58?
No,
We have 50
of 58.
50 of 58.
And then you have the 5 that are still on Cersei. What are those other 3 doing?
They have their own standalone systems.
And one of those, though, is an Evergreen. They have their own separate instance of Evergreen for their institution.
All right.
They
Okay.
didn't want to play in the sandbox with us.
Okay.
And just to piggyback off of what Staci said, the fact that we got 50 of the 58 community colleges, we had one of the vice presidents at the system office he said, I'm not sure what I'm more impressed with, the fact that y'all were able to do this on your own, or the fact that you got 50 of 58 community colleges to agree on anything. If we ever get 40, we're excited we get 40 to agree on anything. And the fact that we got 50 of the 58, was just, he was even blown away by that.
And I will add, we started out with a group of 5.
Right.
And everybody thought you'll be lucky to have all 5.
Yep.
See this through to completion.
I was going to say.
I mean, that timeline was pretty fast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, especially if we're talking about institutional timelines and all that. So I have one more question, and then I'm gonna ask Blake's question too. So those 5 that are still getting the Cersei product through the community college office, is the community college office, are they going to continue doing that for just 5 libraries?
Well, that will be addressed later in our story.
Okay, great. Okay, and then Blake has a little bit of an existential question here. What do you think was the reason that they all agreed?
Well, I think it was several factors. One is because we all lamented as library administrators and as libraries in the system. We lamented the fact that we were on an outdated, antiquated system, that we were not able to, there wasn't anything we can do to change that. There was a lot of resentment as the way the RFPs, the 2 RFPs went with our system office, because we all were excited. We thought we were actually finally going to get a new and updated system, and that we were going to come into this 21st century, and then when that was when both those RFPs fell through, we were all crushed by that, and then the third thing was the way the system office treated us, to be honest with you, in that we had a meeting with the vice president of the system office as to what was happening and why this transpired the way it did. And basically, we were told that it was their decision, and that basically, just paraphrasing, basically, this is the system we're going to have, and y'all are going to have to live with it. And the fact that the system was so locked down, it was locked down to the point of, and I'm not exaggerating here, and my colleagues can confirm this, it was locked down to the point where we couldn't even make staff logins. We had to send an email to the system administrator just to make a staff login. And so that just tells
change
you
passwords
of how locked down that system was. And as Chris said, I think it just things just kind of snowballed, and we were shocked to get the 25 that you see on your screen right now. We were shocked that we got 25. We thought, hey, you know what? If we can get 10 libraries, we knew we had 5 amongst us. We figured if we can just get 5 more libraries, that would at least, start the process. And then, once we got 25, we were like, wow, this is amazing. And then once we got that 25, just like Chris said, it started snowballing. Whereas the other 25 came on board because they're like, oh my gosh, half of CC Link, is going to this new system, and we better get on board, because we even said to them, we said, look, because we got so many libraries in the first cohort, we are not going to have. We're only going to have one more cohort to migrate, and we're not going to have a third year. Originally, we thought we were going to do it in the stage of 3 years, and so those library administrators went back to their administrations and said, look, this is what's happening. We need to get on board now, or we're going to kind of sort of be left out in the cold of this. And so that's when, those schools that were sort of lukewarm, for that first cohort, then they got on board with the, with the second cohort, and that's how it started snowballing. But like I said, this was beyond, as Libby said, this was beyond anything we really thought we would ever get to having 50 libraries within the first 2 years of our migration. So.
That's fantastic.
I do
Go
want
ahead, Charles.
I do want to mention that when CC Link migrated from Dynex to Cersei, AB Tech withdrew and went standalone, staying on the Dynex system. Now, of course, many of you will probably know Cersei and Dynex eventually merged. And so they ended up on a Cersei Dynex project, but you notice that AB Tech was in cohort 2. So all of those years of being standalone, but they saw the merit in joining our group.
I have another question, but if you're going to get to it in your presentation coming on, just tell me that, and we'll just move on. So you have 50 of the 50. It sounds like I'm like really tied up in these numbers, but it's kind of my jam. Is there, if we'll say, if 1 or 3 of those outliers are like, we made a mistake, we want to be sitting at the table with the entire state of cool kids, is there a mechanism for them to change their mind to join? It looked like they were on 1-year contracts right now with CRC.
They are, and I think Rich will go into this later, but we do have a mechanism if they decide they want to join our group at any time.
Okay, then I'll just let you talk about that then when you get there. Awesome. Thank you for all of those questions. Okay.
Is Rich still here?
He is, but he's muted.
He might. Oh.
Sorry.
That's all right.
So getting back to the project and how we started this. So in the beginning, as you saw through the timeline, we obtained a planning grant back in 2023 to put together a plan to migrate, the 58 community colleges, because that was the ultimate goal was to be able to migrate all 58. We didn't think we would be able to achieve that, but we wanted to scale it to that point to where we could be able to do that if that ever became a possibility. And so we did get the planning grant, and as part of the planning grant, we employed a consultant to help us with putting the planning grant together. And so through that first year, we went through, we created focus groups and had different kinds of surveys and questions regarding what libraries would like in a new system and how they would want it managed and all of that. And our planning our consultant, helped us put that through the process, just so we had a plan in place and how we could make that scalable. And so that first year was really focused on that, because we knew that in order for us to get that project grant, through the LSTA grant, that second year, we were going to need a sound plan to be able to say, okay, we're asking our state library to give us these LSTA funds to migrate X number of libraries, but we don't have a plan in place. So we knew we needed to have a solid plan. And so that was that first year, 2023, 2024, that we put that into place. Then once we got through that, then it was a matter of meeting. We had a bunch of information meetings amongst the 58 community colleges, and announcing what we were doing and why we were doing it, and soliciting those libraries to come on board, saying, hey, look, here's an opportunity. We didn't think that we didn't think we were going to have this opportunity, but here's an opportunity to come on board with a new system that we were looking at. And also in one of those as part of the planning grant, we also researched what platform we wanted to go with. And so early on, we identified we probably needed to go with an open source platform, just for the simple fact of number one, it's a lot more cost effective than going with a proprietary system. And then number two, we like the aspect of the open source where a community collaborates and making the system better as things go along. So one of the things that we did during the planning grant, and before the planning grant and during the planning grant, was that we reached out to the state library, and more specifically, we reached out to the NC Cardinal team, and again, a shout out to Benjamin and his team, as well as our state librarian as well, who was very supportive throughout this whole process. Michelle Underhill, who was very supportive throughout this whole process, and Benjamin and his team took countless hours to talk to us about, hey, how do we do a migration? Because only a couple of us had been through it. Charles was the outlier; he had been through 3, but very few of us had ever been through a migration, and just sort of walked us. They really walked us through that process and really helped us to really kind of flesh out that plan of how we would do a migration, if and when the time came, for us to be able to do that migration. And so once we had that, and then throughout the planning grant too, we realized 3 things. If we were going to get this off the ground, we needed to have 3 things. First and foremost, we needed to have some sort of governance committee. So we needed to figure out how we were going to structure the governance committee, and so we fleshed that out amongst a number of libraries who had already agreed to come on board with this project. And so we ended up having a 7-member which will eventually be a 7-member governance committee, and we fleshed out what their responsibilities were. We're going to have a past chair, a chair, a vice chair, and then 4 standing committees: cataloging committee, a resource sharing committee, a reports committee, and a training committee, and then 2 at large amongst the organization. So that was the first thing we needed to do, and we fleshed out. We got to that number. The next thing we needed to do was that we needed to create bylaws, and because because even though we wanted autonomy, we wanted to have as much autonomy amongst the individual libraries, we realized with a shared instance of a catalog, there were certain guardrails that needed to be put in place, amongst all of the participating libraries. So we fleshed that was actually my responsibility. I went ahead and created the bylaws in library fashion. I did my research and chose a bunch of different things from several consortiums that I found online, that where their bylaws were online, and so we ended up fleshing out those bylaws. And then the final thing was that we ended up creating a memorandum of agreement, showing, okay, all of the member libraries agree to all of these things, agree to abide by the bylaws. Here's the process if you want to exit the consortium. Here's the process of what happens if you don't follow the rules of the consortium, and so on and so forth. So those are the three main things that we needed. We needed to make sure that we had fleshed out, before we started the migration process, because we knew it would be a real challenge if we didn't have that in place before the migration. So then, once we got through the planning grant, then we applied for a project grant, and that would have been in July of 24. I'm sorry. We applied in January 24. We officially got the grant July of 2024, and at that time we had 25 libraries, including our five, or the five original that started the project, that agreed to migrate to this system. So we had set our migration date for December of that year, December of 2024. So in essence, we had 6 months to to get everything in order to migrate to this new system. And so, one of the first things, as Charles outlined in the timeline that we talked about, one of the first things we needed was to educate, all of the libraries that were migrating about, how to clean up their data, encouraging them to do an inventory to make sure that, their collection was up to date. Let me back up. I'm sorry. Let me back up a minute, because during the planning grant stage, when we were talking with the state library, we also, as I mentioned, we were researching different open source possibilities that were out there, and we ended up going with Evergreen for two reasons. One is, first and foremost, was that the state library was already using that with NC Cardinal, and the state library had been extremely helpful, with that. And so we thought, hey, if we want to continue to be able to glean and to be able to, get their help, if we went with the same system, they would be able to help us a lot more than if we went with a different system. Then also we realized that we needed to find a vendor that would host our instance. And so, Benjamin and his team, talked about, that they use Mobius, and that they had a very good experience with Mobius. And so they gave us the contact for Donna Bacon, and then Donna set us up, with talking eventually with Debbie and Blake, and I got to say, Debbie and Blake have been outstanding through this whole process. In fact, they would meet with us at least twice, if not three times a month, before we even signed a contract with them. Throughout the planning process, they would talk to us about things we needed to know, or things that we may want to make sure that we understood, and how to go about this, and we would talk about different things, and can we do this, and can we do this, and can we do this, and from that point forward to today, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's at one point, anytime Blake and Debbie ever said, no, we can't do that. And we were just like, really, we can do that? Really, we can do that? Because again, we were used to always, every time we asked if we could do something, we were used to hearing no. And it was just a refreshing, that both of them would be like, sure, we can do that, or yeah, we can figure out how to do that. And so yeah, so so those two things really cemented us, with Evergreen, and they even provided us a sandbox instance of Evergreen for us to play around with to see if this is something that would suit our needs and all. And so that was really helpful. And again, those two things really cemented why we went with Evergreen versus another open source platform. So getting back to the project grant, so we had the cohort, and so we got to the point of where excuse me. So we got to the point of where we were ready to migrate, and we were ready to get our data. And so as part of CC Link, we had to give 90-day notice in the bylaws of the CC Link memorandum of agreement. We were required to give 90 days notice that we were leaving the system, and so all 25 libraries, we signed a letter, we sent it to our system office. The person who managed the CC Link at our system office sent us an email back saying, well, that's not how we do things anymore, because that agreement was created years ago and was never updated, and that's a whole other issue that we probably won't get into here. But basically, what they were saying to us was that, oh, we need you to sign a letter that our legal team will need to put together, saying that you are formally leaving the system. And so we're like, okay, well, can you provide us that document so we can sign it and send it back to you? Well, they're crafting it now. So that was the second week of July that we were told that. So we waited 2 weeks. We still had no letter. We reached out to them again, and the only response we got was, well, it's still with legal. And so, exactly, Ruth. And so, kept going on and on and on and on. And this kept going on through the middle of September. Finally, we had Cleveland Community College was the lead library for the project grant. I was not the library director here at that time. I was at another community college. But the library director here actually went to our president and said, look, this is what's happening. And it took that president reaching out to the president of the North Carolina Community College system to say, look, we're waiting on this, and y'all are just dragging your feet on this, and we're trying to figure out why. And finally, after our president getting involved and different things getting going through the process, that we finally got a release where we were told we didn't even need the letter, and that basically if we wanted to leave, we could leave. So our concern was, now we're 4 or 5 weeks put back because we're waiting to get our data, and Mobius couldn't create our test instance until they had our data. So finally, we get our data in the middle of September, and everything went like clockwork. I mean, it was amazing that Debbie and Blake got our test instance set up. They got all of our training schedules set up, and everything went very smoothly, between that first cohort where I just kept saying, okay, when is the shoe going to drop? Because migrations are not supposed to be this easy. And I'm just waiting for, what's going to happen, that's going to throw another wrench into this. But everything went smoothly. We get to December of 2024, on December 15th of 2024, we went live with the system, and had no very few of any issues. There were a few things that needed to be tweaked, with the migration of the crosswalking, but everything went extremely well. Didn't have any horror stories from any of the libraries, and they all were extremely excited, and to be on the new system, and it just was rolling towards that. And I'm going to open it up to either questions and or my colleagues to maybe even share anything else about that first cohort that maybe I didn't cover. Okay. Well, got no questions or comments from my colleagues. Oh, Libby, go back to that. I'm sorry. Go back to the other slide. So now we get to cohort 2, and with cohort two, um, and with cohort two was a little bit more of a challenge, because once these libraries, in the second cohort, realized that, hey, this is happening, and their administrations got on board. Now, different things started happening where we were having CIOs, chief information officers, reach out to us and saying, "Hey, look, my library administrator is saying they want to switch to this new system, but this is the first I heard about it, and I'm not letting not letting our library, go over to a brand new system that we know nothing about." And so we ended up having to have, we ended up having to have several meetings, with the chief information officers as well as the chief academic officers of the majority of these 25 schools that were considering migrating over in this second cohort, to allay their fears. And one of the things that they were concerned about, obviously, that everybody's concerned about today, is cybersecurity. And the big thing, is multi-factor authentication, and two-step verification, and all of that. And so one of the concerns was that while that was available on the patron side, it wasn't available on the staff client side. And so and we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But those were some of the things that we were dealing with them. And so we worked through that process with them to allay their fears and their concerns. And again, Mobius was fantastic in that they gave us all this documentation that you would ever want regarding the security of the system. And then we get our CIOs are like, well, higher education now are using this new evaluation method called the HECVAT. And so we need a HECVAT filled out. And again, Blake and Debbie were great. They're like, hey, no problem. We'll get this done. With our old system, we would have gotten it done by about 2028. But Blake and Debbie got it to us within about 3 weeks. And so that really smoothed the process. That allayed a lot of people's fears, and with that second cohort. So again, we started the second cohort. Excuse me. We started the second cohort July of this year. July of 2024. And again, those 25 libraries. The great thing about the second cohort that the first cohort didn't have was that the second cohort had 25 libraries that had already been through it. And we had an established governance committee that had been through, helping, plan all of this along the way. So I don't know how much help we were to Blake and Debbie, but we, and Libby will talk about this a little bit later, but our main communication was Basecamp. And so we fielded a lot of the questions that libraries had, during that. We also, as Charles alluded to, this project has been like herding cats. And so we would also reach out to libraries and say, hey, y'all haven't done your crosswalking yet. You need to get in there and then do that. If we need to help you do this, we'll be happy. We'll be happy to do this. And so we were able to help with a lot of those individualized things that libraries needed, to walk them through the process of the of migration. But and again, similar to the first cohort, they migrated in December of 2024, and we picked December because that was one of the slowest times that we have within the community college system, because it was after our fall semester was over. And so again, their migration went almost as smoothly as ours. There was a little bit of difference in that, where we had one non-CC Link library migrating over, we had two in that second cohort. And so, Mobius and Blake and Debbie having to navigate, basically doing 3 migrations. One with, the 23 libraries coming from CIRC Dynex, and then one coming from a standalone CIRC Dynex system, and then one coming from, I can't even remember what their system was. But so there was a little bit of that, but overall, I think things went extremely smoothly with that as well, and everything has been great. And in talking about our vendor contract, we signed a 3-year contract with Mobius, and we are now coming into the final year of that contract, and we're looking forward, to signing another 3-year contract. But we've got some things to iron out, not amongst Mobius so much, but just kind of navigating amongst the community colleges, because as we talked about, our system office has put an RFP in, and we need to figure out, okay, how many libraries are seriously considering migrating to that system office system that's going to be coming up in 2026. And so those are some of the things that we're working through as we speak. But we're excited about the future of this. We think that this is just going to grow and however it's positioned moving forward, within the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, we think this is going to be, Mobius and Evergreen as our preferred ILS system is going to be there in some way, shape, or form. And then the final thing with our project was that we development of our logos, and so we had a contest amongst the original 25 libraries that were migrating to develop a logo for our North Carolina Community College Evergreen ILS Group logo. And so this is the logo we came up with, and I'm proud because one of my librarians here at Cleveland Community College, she's the one that came up with the design there, and so that's what you see on our main page of our Evergreen front-facing OPAC system. So. All right, Libby, you can go to the next slide. And who?
It's me.
That's you and Staci. Okay.
Yep. This one's mine. So you've heard a little bit about some of this. We've talked about it just as we've gone through our process. But for any group considering this kind of thing, we had some key factors that we think are important, and that really we had a lot of conversations around these things, and one of those is staffing and capacity. Do you have the capacity? Do you have the staff level to participate in a migration? Because like Charles and Rich have talked about, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to clean up your data, to clean up your records. We encouraged every library that joined us to do a large scale weeding project, just to make sure that what was going to come over into the new ILS was up to date, relevant resources that needed, that our students still needed. It also helps to have experience with state library and LSTA grants, and we were very fortunate on our team. I had at one point been a committee member for our state library, for the committee that approves our state level LSTA grants, and one other member on our original planning team also had similar experience. And we also, I don't think we've alluded to this. I don't think we can say it enough. But along with that experience comes the relationships. We all have a great relationship with our state librarian. We all developed great relationships with Benjamin, and their experiences and knowledges of their functionality and LSTA grants and how funds work were just, I can't express how helpful and how important those things were as we were going through this process. And then there's always that pro and con of switching up the system. For us, there really were very few cons of making this move. We were moving to an up-to-date system. We liked the open source nature of it. As you can probably figure out from the things that we have and have not said, the self-governance that we gained is huge. And of course, the cost. We've been able to implement a working ILS at, I think it's 10% of the cost of what our state was paying. It's an improved usability for students, faculty, and staff, including our staff. We talk a lot about the experience for the users, but those users include our staff too. And our system we left was not user friendly for anyone, us, students, faculty. We also have a better integration with Summon, which is provided for us by NC Live, which is our online library cooperative. So we have access. Libraries that are interested can use Summon as a discovery tool. And in the system we left, the updates and integration to Summon was something that happened manually from our system office administrator. And one of our points of friction was that he, the person in that role, saw Summon as a direct competitor. And so we had trouble, getting that taken care of on a timely basis. And now that integration updates nightly and it's automated. And so, for us, it also, these cost savings, this ease of use, self-governance, all really came together. And I also will go back to a point that that Rich alluded to when we talked about our cooperative agreement. And the cooperative agreement was last signed in 2017, and we were told, well, like you said, you have to abide by this. Well, Libby was past chair of our group. We have another librarian, Joel, who was chair, and I was vice chair. The three of us started in early 2020 trying to work with our system office to update that document. And we were basically told this document is not important or not needed at this time. And so that's kind of why it was a little bit of a shock to us when it's like, oh no, we have to go by this document. This is a very important document. And so, somewhere between 2020 and us actually being able to move forward with our project, the importance of that document shifted. And so, these, like I said, these are the things that we've considered. And I have a smallish staff, and we were able to, to handle everything. We had the capacity to do everything we needed to do. And I think that that's been true across our system for the most part. All right, Libby, I'm ready for the next one. And so we have, we've seen these long-term, what we think of as these long-term benefits. We've continued to share our collections. We now, I've heard we're up to 50 libraries, and all 50 libraries are sharing resources through our interlibrary loan. We are a true, I think of us as a true cooperative because we do share the governance. We have conversations with each other. There's no one library or library administrator who makes the decisions in a silo. Even those of us who are, Libby, Charles, Rich, and I, we refer to ourselves as the planning committee. We don't make decisions in our silo and then take them over to the governance committee. Everything it's truly a shared governance. We have kind of looked at different times about the potential for integrating our instance of Evergreen with North Carolina Cardinal to kind of connect our resources, make those a little more easily available to public, and the vice versa, and make public resources a little bit easier for our patrons to discover. One of the things I don't think we've hit on much yet at all either is the ADA standards. We ran several through the process of filling out the paperwork and working on the grant and testing and all of those things. We ran ADA usability tests repeatedly. And I think at one point, the ILS that we left had as many as 95 errors on one page. And so now we are much better able to serve our students who need the resources to be ADA compliant. And we can also make some moves and make some changes and upgrades as needed without having to switch vendors, without having to switch ILSs, actually. So the move from Moss to Equinix is the example of that. And then the cost savings, like long term, for us, it's a worthy investment, but it's also not as significant in terms of cost. One of the things that we did when we wrote the grants is we went ahead and we've projected out the cost for the next few years. So every library that's part of our team knows when the grant ends, when their institution will have to pick up the cost of the service and what that cost will be. And we've, and I will admit, this was not me. I'm very well known for not being the numbers person. If you want it wrong, give it to me. If you want it right, let Libby or Charles or Rich look at your numbers. But we've really tried to do a good job of making sure that the costs are based on FTE, so that the smaller schools with, in theory, a smaller budget would not have to absorb the same level of cost as the larger schools who get more money, have a higher allocation from our system office. But this is one, and I think Rich will go into this a little bit more later. This is one area of concern because we are not on the system contract. The system office does not pay for our ILS. We pay out of our college's individual budgets. And so some schools may choose to go back to the system so that the system will pick up that cost. So that's something we're looking at for the future as well. Just where is the cost savings, and trying to make sure that all of our shared group members see the value of staying with what we are working to build.
I have a question about that,
Yes.
as you can
Sure.
probably imagine. So for the system office, and I think I probably have some confusion between the system office, community, the link group, and because those are distinct from one another. Is that correct?
The CC Link group is a subgroup that is, so they kind of report to the system office. They're a group, a working group that the system office oversees, but is made up of librarians who are out in the libraries.
Okay, but it is related then to the system office.
Yes.
So I don't understand why the system office wouldn't say, "Hey, this represents," and maybe they will in the future. Yes, the system office holds the contract with CRC Dynamics. This is exactly where my question is. The significant difference in cost, why they wouldn't say, "Hey, that's cheaper. Why don't we pick that up?" And instead of trying to encourage people to go back into this thing, first of all, that they don't necessarily want and that costs more.
Well, see, that's where the RFP comes in, and the system office identifies that or realizes that 50 of the 58 community, well, 50 technically 51 of the 58 community colleges have chosen to go with Evergreen, and Mobius. Managing their instance of Evergreen, like we said, the 50 libraries that are in the North Carolina Community College Evergreen ILS group, and then the one standalone instance of Evergreen. And so with that RFP, we're not 100% sure, but they push really hard to get a quote from Mobius regarding Evergreen. And so it's our understanding that through this RFP process, they're going to choose Evergreen, and Mobius to manage their an instance of Evergreen. And what they're hoping that's going to lure some of those 50 libraries back to the system office platform.
Why? Why? It sounds like they're working against you rather than working with you.
They most definitely are. And again,
okay.
And again,
okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't just missing some obvious thing.
No. And again, it's because the person who's in charge at the system office of managing, the ILS presence from the system office, really wants to get all of the libraries back onto their system. So then again, they can then control it again, like they control the other system. That person doesn't understand that the 50 libraries didn't just leave because Evergreen's a better system, which it obviously is. We also left because of our desire to have autonomy of our system on the local level, and that's where we've really clashed with the system offices. That they want complete control and give us very limited control, whereas we want a fair semblance of autonomy in how we manage our system on a local level.
Gosh, that seems like a lot of work to get something that they don't necessarily want.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm just going to let that hang in the air and let you get on with it because I feel this is obviously an evergreen crowd. So
I will add one other thing that I think is interesting when we talk about the system office and their decision making. When we first approached them and said we would like to do this, we would like you, we want you to be a part of this, have these conversations with us. We were told that there is no future in open source and that it's not a good way to do things and that we would regret the decision pretty quickly.
well, let me just say this one thing that has nothing to do with your thing. As long as I am alive, there's no guarantee for that. There is a future in open source. So in libraries, I mean, there are other people that probably feel the same way, but let me just say that right now. Anyway,
No,
backing off.
I agree.
Yeah,
And
fighting words.
yeah, I will also say one more thing, and then I promise I'll relinquish control back to Rich. I think it's also important to know that the person in charge of choosing and maintaining and overseeing the shared ILS we have at the system office is not a librarian. So she has ultimate responsibility for whatever is offered, but she does not have a library background or any library credentials at all. And I'll get off of that soapbox now.
Very good point, Staci.
Yeah.
So as we talked about, and again, before I go into the cost savings, cost was obviously a major consideration, for us because individual libraries and or individual institutions were going to have to pay for this system, but it wasn't the overall overarching factor into why we picked Evergreen and also Mobius to host our instance of Evergreen. But we wanted to put these as a stark contrast, and these numbers. So in 2022, for the 52 libraries that were on CRC Dynex through CC Link, our system office in the state of North Carolina was paying $594,000 a year, and that cost was going up each year, significantly going up each year. And that was and as part of that $594,000, they were paying CRC Dynex 90,000 of that, around 90 to 100,000 of that 594,000 for a system administrator, because it was a CRC Dynex employee that was the system administrator for our instance of CRC Dynex with CC Link. As you can see, for the first year, with the planning grant, we had 5 libraries that were part of the planning grant. We got an LSTA grant for $50,000. We only used 47 of the $50,000 we were awarded, and as you can see, the LSTA grant paid $42,300 of that, whereas and the matching funds from the 5 libraries was $4,700, which was very manageable. As you can see, the project grant for 23-24 with the 25 libraries was also a 10% matching cost for that first year, since this was a completely separate grant that we applied for. We received, I think we requested $55,000, which we were approved for. We spent $52,353 of that. That you can see the 10%. I'm sorry, it was $60,000, and then you can see the total funds were $57,000, just under $58,000. And then as part of the 2024-25, adding those extra 25 libraries, complete with 50 libraries with the 33% match, our total funds came to just under $160,000. And to put that in perspective, you always hear the adage, libraries don't migrate that often. Number one, because it's such a pain and a hassle, but also, a lot of times it's cost prohibitive. And you can see with this, our migration overall, including the LSTA money that we got, was almost $300,000 less than what our system office was paying for just the regular standalone system the regular system we had with CRC Dynax. And the other point I would make on this with the cost savings is that, as you can see the breakdown of these funds, and as Charles alluded to earlier, the majority of community colleges in North Carolina are fairly small community colleges. We have maybe seven, maybe eight community colleges out of the 58 that if they wanted their own standalone system, they could have their own standalone system. They've got the money to be able to do that. But, the vast majority of community colleges just don't have that money to be able to do that. And so if it was not for this LSTA grant funding that was made available to us, there is no way we would have been able to even start this project, let alone get to the point of where we were able to migrate those 50 libraries. So we're extremely gratified and grateful, for the system office. I'm sorry, for the state library, making that opportunity available for us to be able to get that LSTA grant. But just those figures in and of itself should be, a stark contrast. We not only got a better system than what we were on, we did it at a significant savings to the taxpayers of North Carolina. So that's another thing that we're proud of with this project. All right, Libby, I guess you can go to the next slide.
So, as Rich said, we were on the CRC Dynex system. The state was spending close to $600,000 per year toward the end. I think the 594 is the 2023 fiscal year. We're not 100% sure about that figure, but we think we're pretty close with it. Whereas with Mobius hosting and maintaining our instance, we're at a little over 76,000 for 50 libraries. So you can see the magnitude of savings. So you do the simple math. The cost per library on the old system was over $11,000. Just as a basis of comparison, when Isothermal was on the previous system with our local public libraries, that system was costing my college around $9,000 a year. So the system office was paying even more for what I would consider to be a less developed system. And then now we're averaging out to a little over $1,500 per library. And of course, as we said, that's on a sliding scale based on FTE. I think for the coming year, Isothermal's cost is going to be about $1,100. And the big difference being the system office holds the contract and is paying for the CC Link system, whereas each of our individual institutions is having to pay for Mobius to host and maintain our system. But you can see, we're saving the state millions of dollars over the long term by making this move. So not only do we have a better, more responsive system, we're saving the state a lot of money.
So I'm going to talk just a little bit about getting organized, because that's my, whatever you call that, that's my area. We started out, keeping everything. We would keep notes and we would save them. I would save them in my Google Drive, my own personal Google Drive, because I was kind of in limbo between colleges at the time. I retired from Gaston College, and now I'm working part-time at Cleveland Community College. So you can read between the lines on that. You might remember that Gaston was one of the original 5. Anyway, I started out with the personal Google. When I came here in 2022, I was working with Lisa Trexler, and she and I set up the SharePoint here at Cleveland, and we used their account, and their IT staff. The IT staff here at Cleveland has been phenomenal in helping us get that set up. I was so worried. I mean, we had saved all this stuff in Google, and I was worried about, what am I going to do? How am I going to move all this stuff? They did it in 5 minutes. I should know, the IT folks, they know what they're doing. And we got it all put in a safe place in SharePoint, and I didn't have to, you know, clog up my own Google Drive. And of course, Benjamin at the state library had given us access to a Basecamp account, and it has been a godsend. That has been so helpful to us in communication and storing other documents. So now I still use the SharePoint for everything, but I post all of our minutes and correspondence goes into Basecamp. So you can see a little screenshot of our account here. Um, and we've got everybody in there. And Blake and Debbie, I think, are in there still. And we can communicate using that.
Okay. Before I go to this slide, I just want to give a special shout out to Libby. In the sense of Libby has kept this project organized for 5 years. I don't know how she did it.
Plus,
Yeah, plus, and on top of that, she not only kept this kept us organized with all this paperwork and stuff. She's also kept me organized because if Libby had a dollar for every time I would come to her and say, Libby, can you find this for me? I can't find it. Or Libby, where do we do this? And where do we have this? Libby wouldn't even have to work part time anymore. So I mean, she was fantastic in really, being the glue that kept this project together. So, in forming an ILS group, we talked about it a little bit already. We already talked about it a little bit already with the formation of the governance committee for the, and that's been great. And we've gotten buy-in from, the great thing about it is we've actually gotten buy-in from the 50 libraries that are part of the of our group, and to the point of where, and Libby and Staci can talk this more than I can. With CC Link and the steering committee for CC Link, near the end of that, it was like pulling teeth trying to get people to serve on that governing body. We now have people reaching out to us with our governance committee for our instance of Evergreen, reaching out to us and saying, Rich, how can I get involved? What can I do? And so we actually have people, that are real interested in getting involved, and our committees, it's been amazing. I mean, we've got anywhere between 5 to 10 people on each of those committees, which before, like I said, with our previous steering committee with CC Link, if we had 2 or 3, that was a lot. So that was a real success, and that really is the driving force behind our instance is everybody working together toward a shared goal and a shared mission. And then again, that creation of the memorandum of agreement and bylaws for the new organization, that was key and critical because we were able upfront to give those to each of the libraries that were considering migrating and saying, okay, we would love to have you, as part of our group, but here are the ground rules, and here are the organizational rules that you're going to have to, that you're going to have to abide by, and that you're going to have to be okay with, and are you okay with those? And so that made the transition easy. In that I can say, in the 2 years that in the almost 2 years that we've been going through this, we've had very little pushback on any of the laws or rules or things we put in a place. We've had little things here and there, but overall, everybody's been extremely thankful and extremely okay with working within the guidelines that we have set with that, which is amazing. Again, I reiterate, when you get 50 institutions all as part of one organization, there has a tendency of people wanting their own thing, and people have been really great about saying, hey, you know what? Okay, I would really like this, but I understand why you guys are doing it that way, and I'm okay with y'all doing it, this particular way. And maybe that's because this was 20 years in the making. People have been frustrated for 20 plus years, regarding this old system, that this was such a breath of fresh air that like, hey, you know what? I don't want to upset the apple cart too much. So, but I mean, we've gotten very little pushback regarding regarding forming the ILS group and putting those memorandum of agreements and the bylaws into place. So, and yep. And so, is this me or is this somebody else, Libby? Me? Okay. So one of the things that we were excited about was, again, as I mentioned earlier, when we had a meeting with our with the CIOs of that second cohort, one of the concerns they had was there not being multi-factor authentication on the staff client side of Evergreen. And so, that was one of the things that we realized, was going to be a deal breaker if we didn't have a plan in place, or if we couldn't figure out how to get this done somehow. And so, the planning committee, which the four of us talking today, we were part of we were the planning. We are the planning committee. I'm sorry. Yes, Blake. I mean SSO. That's what I meant. And so, as part of the planning committee, we're like, okay, how can we put this into place? So we found out that Equinox was what was the company that did SSO on the patrons. I'm sorry, on the OPAC side, and so we ended up reaching out, asking them if they could do it and to provide us a quote. And so when they provided us that quote, we were like, wow, with 50 libraries, with the grant able to pay 33% of this, this is something that we really can do. And so we ended up contracting with Equinox, and we're excited to announce that, well, not to announce, but as you all probably know, that Equinox has completed that project, and we're in the process of hopefully implementing that here in the near future. In our instance of Evergreen, and according to what Blake tells me, this will be part of the next upgrade to Evergreen for everybody to take advantage of. So one of the things we're excited about is that we're able to early on be able to add something to the Evergreen community, because I'll tell you, you all have given us so much with people reaching out to us and asking how they can help, or us reaching out to people and everybody in the Evergreen community just being extremely open and willing to help us throughout this project. We were excited that we were able to give back some small portion of that to the Evergreen community as well. So we're excited about that as well. So what I would say in conclusion to our presentation is that we put this together kind of as a roadmap of hey, if there are a group of libraries that want to form a consortium and look to form an ILS group, what are the key things that you need to look out for, and I've identified 4 or 5 of those key things. And one is find a system that works for you. Not every system is conducive for is conducive for the type of library that you have. And so try to find what system works for you. 2, find people that have done it before that can help you. We've reached, as we all have stated throughout this process, our state library and NC Cardinal were instrumental in helping us throughout this process. From Benjamin sharing what forms that they used for libraries that were migrating into NC Cardinal. We used that as a example for us to craft what we needed. And as equally as important as that and the system is, find a vendor that's going to help you, and that's gonna that's gonna be right for you, and that's really where we hit the jackpot too, because again, Mobius has been so patient with us and helping us each step of the way throughout this process. And we wouldn't be where we are today without those 2 organizations, without North Carolina State Library and the NC Cardinal team and Mobius. This would not have been possible, because again, we're librarians that we didn't really know much about the ILS system, how ILS systems, the nuts and bolts of how they worked, and they were patient with us, and they gave us an education throughout this process. and then the final thing is you need to be dedicated and understand this is going to be a long process. It's not going to happen in 3 to 6 months, or even a year. Like we said, this was a 5 to 6 year project and still counting. But I can tell you that personally, for me, this has become, a lifelong process for me. This has been a great journey, and as somebody stated earlier, I made a lot of really good friends throughout this process. Libby, Charles, and Staci. We've become extremely close throughout this process, and you have to, when you meet, almost weekly for 5 plus years. And so that's that was really important too. And the last thing I will leave you with motivation. And I wanted to label, I wanted to name this program this, but Libby and Charles and Staci wouldn't let me. I wanted to label it as tick a librarian off at your own peril, because it was the impetus of us being ticked off from our system office, and us saying, you know what, we need to find something better, and by golly, we're going to make this work, even if it consumes, every waking hour that we have. So, y'all, I don't know if y'all wanted to share any other lessons that we learned through this as well before we open it up for questions.
Well, the support is ongoing. I mean, we're still using NC Cardinal's cataloger training to train our catalogers in the basics. At some point, we do want to develop our own, but it was a great jump start to be able to have that, just to get them familiar. And so we also adopted the structure that they use. They have a two-level, item cataloger and bibliographic cataloger, and so we adopted that as well. And we put our own rules and guardrails around that, but just being able to use that structure. And also continuing to be able to use Basecamp for communication across the entire group. I don't think we ever did address why we are called an ILS group rather than the C word.
Please, are you able to address it right now?
Well,
Yes.
I don't
Okay.
know. Is
Do you
Benjamin
wanna?
still on the call? Is Benjamin still in here? Because we may not be able to address it.
Close your ears, Benjamin.
Benjamin is still in here. Yes.
For, for,
Are
for
we
some
being
reason,
recorded?
Yes.
Yes.
uh,
It
for
has to
some
do with
reason,
the LSTA grants.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. For some reason, with the LSTA grant, we were told that we couldn't be called a consortium because there was something in the IMLS STA funding that you weren't allowed to use funds for something like that. Oh, sorry, Will. Close your ears too.
And so you are a group currently.
Yes.
Currently.
Yeah, up
Shared ILS.
until June 30th of this year.
You will not be under the auspices of the LSTA
Yes.
requirements. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have a question about. So I come from Evergreen, Indiana, which is a public library consortium. I'm not there now, and I don't know. There is a Courtney Brown in here, but I don't think she is my Indiana Courtney Brown. I think she is NC's Courtney Brown. But so we were, and they are a highly networked resource sharing group. They're a consortium. They didn't have the same things. And this also has held true, especially for Pines. Um, is resource sharing a part of your group now? It, and if not, do you anticipate it being more so in the future?
It's a robust part of our group. We have from the get-go, that was one of the things we stressed to anyone who was interested in joining, is like, you're going to be putting up your collection or the bulk of your collection. We all
Okay.
have things that we have to keep local, things that are on reserve, things that are in special collections, rare books, things like that. But the bulk of our collections are up to be shared among all 50 libraries, and that is central to the concept. We really wanted to mirror what NC Cardinal has done with their consortium, where you have one card and you can walk into any library and use that card and check something out, or you can place a hold on that item that's all the way across the state and have it sent to your local library, check it out there, turn it in there. We had that somewhat under CC Link, but I think it has really taken off since we changed systems. And now we have 3 additional libraries that we did not have previously because they were standalone instances. And so now their patrons are able to take advantage of the larger group, where it was more difficult before. If they didn't have OCLC interlibrary loan, they were pretty much out of luck. Now they have 49 other libraries that they can borrow from. So yeah, the resource sharing was central to the concept.
That's awesome. Okay, Chris has a question. Chris is from Pines, if you don't know him. And he has a question. Are policies and procedures, and Chris, like circulation policies, hold policies, loan durations, right? Not like the governance part, like the Evergreen policies and procedures. Is that what you're referring to? Okay. Are they consistent across the non consortium?
No,
Nope.
Okay.
we all kind of march to our own tune. And in fact, we just had a discussion about this in governance Thursday, um, wanting to know if there could be a unified policy across the entire consortium. And but it was one of the things we signed on for, that you're going to be loaning things. And just because Isothermal has a 30-day loan period doesn't mean that another library is going to have that 30-day loan period. They might have a 2-week or a 3-week. They might loan to their faculty for 6 months or a year or something like that. So those are things we have to work through together as a group. And so there's some give and take there, but another decision we made early on, we're building a culture here, and part of that culture is we're not going to try and dictate what happens within your 4 walls if it does not affect the consortium at large. And interlibrary loan is one of those areas of friction where it does affect other libraries. But for the sake of consistency, if I have a student that comes in and they're checking out 3 books from Isothermal and picking up an interlibrary loan from Cleveland, it's to that student's benefit if all 4 of those items are due on the same date. And so by defaulting to the local rules on that's what happens. But it's still, I mean, it's something we're going to have to work through as a group, but we're working through it together. Nobody's telling us how this is going to go.
So this leads into that question. Do all of the libraries then have someone in-house who manages, whether changing or adding or deleting, that's another thing in Evergreen, but policies?
Right now, we do not. And in answer to Chris's comment about sounds like administrative fun, Debbie and Blake have been tremendous and very patient with us in setting exactly, and that is Debbie. but we're now on the system long enough where Debbie and I, Debbie and the 4 of us had a recent conversation of where some of that we're going to try to learn how to do some of that stuff. Like for instance, setting like semester holds. Like a a lot of us rent out laptops for like a whole semester, and Debbie's been doing that, since we migrated, to the system, and now we got 50 libraries and 50 individual libraries saying, okay, I need our date here, I need this date, I need this, and so we're going to slowly start taking over, some of that managerial process on an individual library level, and maybe even eventually, take over some of that on a governance committee level as well. But like I said, Debbie and Blake have both been very patient and very helpful, when it comes to things like that. As Libby said, we don't need a little, we need a lot of hand holding.
Yeah, all the colleges, we've got some. We've said it in this presentation. Some are really small. There's only one or two full-time staff members,
Right.
and so some people are going to continue to need that hand holding, or just please let me submit a ticket and do it for me. But some of
Yeah,
us
no,
do it.
this is exciting though. I mean, okay, I have two more questions. One is pretty easy, so it's a yes or no question. Can a student from, for instance, Isothermal, walk into the library at Catawba County and check out materials right now?
As of a month ago, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's my follow-up question. I, based on an assumption that I have that could be wrong, I anticipate that the implementation of single sign-on, well, I guess it's on they already have it for the students, don't they? So maybe it
Yeah.
wouldn't matter. That would cause an issue, but maybe as of a month ago, already figured that out.
Well, now
No,
regarding,
that was
you talk about for patrons
okay.
being
Those are
able to
three
come in
different
and
things.
count on the
Yes.
OPEC side.
You tell me how this experience might work for students and what is going on in terms of the single sign-on is going to be for staff, but does that already work for the students
Yes, and in fact,
through your learning management system or whatever?
right. Yes, so we do have single sign-on turn on. Well, let me back up. There's a few libraries that have implemented single sign-on on the OPAC side of it, the patron
Okay.
side of it.
Hmm.
By the end of this year, we are going to be requiring every library to do that, just because that's what our CIOs want us to do, want to have happen, as well as on the staff client side. What Blake has been able to do is that he's been able to um, uh, put it to where if you want to access your account on the OPEC side, you have the option of using single sign-on or using a library card number. So if somebody is not part of a community, like for instance, we have community patrons. So if somebody's not, doesn't have single sign-on, from the institution, they can sign on using their library account number.
That's awesome. Okay. Those are my questions. And I think that Chris got his question answer. Let me read it through real quick. The answer was Basecamp, right? Okay, good. All right. Any other questions from anyone? If not, I want to say thank you. I know that you were worried that this was not going to be like interesting or people were going to attend. This was a great presentation. I do have another question about the HECVAT. So you guys had to do that. Did I'm assuming your committee did that, but
No,
did you guys
no,
fill that out or did Mobius fill that out?
no. Mobius filled that out. One for that covered all 50 colleges.
Okay. And then, so I guess I have a question for Debbie and Blake about that. Would it have been, and I'm thinking about this in terms of we've done VPAT work, we being the Evergreen project, would it have been helpful for you to have some of that already filled out? Okay. To then just put in your organizational name and whatever the minor updates need to be for your organization as a service provider. Okay, great. So I'm going to take that to the Evergreen project. Um, am I? Yeah, I am somehow or other. I'm going off that board, but it doesn't matter. Any other questions? If not, I want to say thank you again to all of you. I would love to hear a presentation about how the single sign-on goes on next year. So maybe think about that. But you guys are doing such great work, and we're happy to welcome you to the community again and ongoing, and hope to see y'all at other sessions. I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye, and then the next session in here will be at 3:30 with
Ruth,
BG Colvin. Yeah.
Ruth, real quickly, Benjamin had a question about any downsides for the community colleges regarding
Oh, yeah.
Evergreen. And I just would quickly say that the only concern we had, and it was fixed, or it was actually addressed before we actually migrated to Evergreen, was a course reserves module.
Yeah.
Which was very important for obviously important for academic institutions, academic libraries to be able to have that, for instructors or professors that want to put course materials on reserve in the library. And so, it was my understanding that I guess Lynn Benton College was the one that developed that course reserve module, and that's been great, for us, because a significant number of our 50 community college libraries use that functionality and that feature, and that was a game changer too, because that was one of the questions that came up when we were originally migrating the first 25 was, is there a course reserves module? So we were able to say, oh yeah, it was just implemented. So,
and the person that was well, there were many people involved in that, but one of the main people there is actually listening to us right now. She's in the session.
oh,
so
great. Well, thank you.
She's not at Lynn Benton anymore, but she is here. So, all right. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you down the road. Great presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, everybody.